Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast to help you and your family cruise a little smarter. And I'd like to welcome back to the show. She's finally at home for, I think, like a week, and then she's back on the road again. How you doing today, Christy?
Here's hoping. I'm doing well.
Yes, here's hoping everybody's doing well.
I mean, 12 of us have to test negative. That's a lot of people to not have COVID in a week.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed and see how it goes. But, you know, that's just the nature of travel these days. Hey, Christy, why don't we get out of the U.S. for a while? Because we haven't been out of the U.S. for a while since we've been talking about Greece.
Yeah, a few weeks.
Let's head back over to the old world, and we're going to do an epic trip that happened in June. And I'd like to welcome back to the show. And she's not by herself this time. She's got pretty much everybody in the family. How are you doing today, Jen, down in Texas?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Not too bad. And you brought the whole family with today. I'm excited to talk to your kids and your dog as well. Although I'm not sure that did your dog have as good a vacation as your kids?
No, the dog was stuck with grandma. So it was not the dog's highlight.
Our dog, we had to send our dog away to, he goes to a farm, and it's like his favorite thing because they got a pond and they got a bridge over the pond, and the dogs just run like crazy. And I think he doesn't want to come home sometimes after we get back from our trips.
Grandma's got a pretty good yard, but I don't think they clearly still miss us.
Well, I'm excited to talk about this trip. I mean, maybe not the dog coverage personally, but that's okay. I'm excited to talk about this trip. This is like an epic, like bucket list, something that I would absolutely try to put together myself kind of trip. I cannot wait to get into it.
So let's just jump into it. But before we do that, we want to welcome to the show as well your daughter and your son, Violet and Garrett. How are you two doing?
Good.
Cloud's good.
Garrett's going on adventures around the house.
Okay. Well, Garrett may join us at certain points during the show too, but thanks for sticking with us, Violet, because we're curious to get your take as well. Our kids have enjoyed going to Europe, but they're always happy to get home. And I think that maybe at the end you guys were too, but let's jump into this trip. Jen, why don't you give us an overview of what you guys had planned and how it came about?
Sure. I think it kept growing because we've been trying to get over to Italy for about 3 years, and it kept getting canceled. And my vacation is always very patchwork, and I kept kind of getting lucky and building vacation weeks together. And so at first I had 2. So then we added on a 6-night DCL Mediterranean cruise, which we'd also been trying to do for a couple of years because the dates lined up. It started in Barcelona, finished in Civitavecchia. And so then we could catch the ABD out of Rome. They meshed perfectly. And then we thought, well, we'll try to spend a couple of days in Barcelona. And so at first I was just going about planning that on my own because, we've done France and Japan and a couple of places on our own before. But then I had this sort of ABD schedule at the very end of the year that I kind of realized that we're not going to be able to get away for Christmas this year. So I was trying to figure out what to do with it because you can only move them once. And I didn't want to move it into 2023 because honestly, we really didn't know what our plans were going to be. So I thought, you know what, I already have some money tied up in it. I'll just do the short escape, which was a couple of days before the cruise, which also kind of lined up perfectly. And as it turned out, there was one other couple doing this whole kind of epic trip. So we kind of got to hang out with them a little bit all throughout the trip.
Like, they did the ABD, then the cruise, then the ABD again?
Yeah, the exact same thing, which was pretty funny.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Michael and Marian. Yeah, and then, but the grandparents only joined us for the last leg, the Italy ABD, our grandparents.
So Violet, I'm going to put you on the hot spot. Do you get any say in some of these trips when your family plans these? Does your mom allow you to kind of say, hey, I want to go here this year?
The Spain thing was something I've been wanting to do for a lot of years. So I think I got some input in what to do with that. I mean, I normally request, limited flights, long bus rides. I have really bad motion sickness. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes it doesn't. It just depends on what mom wants to do, really. So kind of, but not a lot.
Violet has outlawed all catamarans in our future.
Yes, I didn't know that.
So although, we're going to try this scopolamine patch, the seasickness patch next time in hopes that maybe that will work for her now that she's adult sized. She's taller than me now, because it's definitely a challenge, even on the Mediterranean, which is pretty smooth. She had a couple nights where she had to take some Dramamine.
So we recently talked let's just jump into the Spain part of it then and getting to Barcelona. Had you guys been to Barcelona before?
We had never been to Spain, no.
Okay. So ABD, takes the edge off a little bit. They get to do the planning and everything like that. Had you guys been on a short escape before? Was this your first one?
First one.
That's our first short escape. Yeah.
I recently talked to Chris down in California, and they've done a couple of short escapes. And I know you guys have done the longer ABDs. What was your overall thoughts of the short escape? Did it get you to do everything that you wanted to do? Did you get that same feeling where you feel like you're part of a group going out to see things? Does that make sense what I'm asking? I guess like that's one of the perks of ABD is being able to build those bonds and experience things together.
I don't think you bond as well with your group. We definitely felt a little bit more like individual families, I think, on that. You don't get to know people as well. That being said, the guides were still great. I really liked the itinerary. We did do a couple of things in Barcelona on our own because you still have a little bit of downtime and there's a ton to do. And we definitely want to go back to Barcelona. But I liked the itinerary a lot and, enjoyed the brief times I did chat with other people, but you don't bond like you do for the week-long ones. That's for sure.
When your ABD started, did you fly in before the start date or did you fly in for the start? Like, did you arrive a day earlier or just arrive in time to start the ABD?
We were going to come in earlier, but my friend decided to get,
married.
She got married in Cancun the weekend before. So I had to cut it a little short and I flew out to Cancun and kept my fingers crossed I was going to test negative, thank God, and flew back. And then the next day we flew up it's hard, you can't get to Europe directly from San Antonio. So we flew up to JFK, spent the night, because again, we try to limit with kids in general, but with bowel motion sickness and just with the craziness of flights lately and things being canceled. We wanted to get to New York, spend the night in the TWA hotel, and then we took a direct flight from JFK to Barcelona the next night. So we actually landed the morning of the escape, which we usually, like I said, don't love to do, but it worked out okay.
And then they picked you up from the airport then, right? And
they
brought
did.
you. And then how did the Barcelona short escape start?
First thing we did is we took a pretty long drive up like a famous, I want to say hill or mountain, like
Montjuic.
Yeah, I don't remember the name. It was a really great dinner, actually. We had a dinner and we got to know each other. We had some get to know you activities. And then we went back down and that was pretty late. It didn't really start till later in the day.
Yeah, we arrived in the morning and our room wasn't ready. So I had already planned a it's actually a sidecar motorcycle tour where you can kind of drive around the city. And predictably, my son loved it. It made Violet a little sick. So she and her dad bailed out early. For families, especially, it was a really fun activity because you kind of got an overview of the city. We got lucky. The weather was beautiful. One person sat kind of on the back of the motorcycle and another person sat in the sidecar. And obviously there was a driver and we had two motorcycles. So I'd recommend that for families for sure. But then, we started with the dinner. We were able to check in luckily by then and shower off and then go to dinner. And then you kind of had, 2 full days of activity after that. The first day was sort of Gaudi based. We went to Sagrada Familia and Parkwell. And then the next day was Montserrat.
What did you think, Violet, of the Familia del Cor? I can never say it.
Yeah, we loved it. It was beautiful,
really
right?
cool.
And you love the park.
I'm normally not the biggest person on architecture, but it's really interesting and unique and kind of amazing. So even if you don't love that kind of stuff, you're not really into architecture, I think it's still really worth seeing and learning about because I feel like it's kind of for everyone because it's so cool that you can't really not be interested in it.
Yeah, their dad loves architecture. And I take them to a lot of churches in Europe and they do start to blend together. But that one, of course,
that was a memorable one.
That one stands out.
That was probably my favorite of everyone. We went a bunch of places in Rome too, but I think that was still my favorite church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really beautiful.
Over the Duomo? Because you would have went to the
Duomo that was definitely their favorite.
Wow, that's great. That's great.
If our listeners haven't seen it before, definitely go and Google it. It's Familia, FAMILIADELGARDA, and just the stained glass and the light in there is just amazing. I've never been there myself, but the pictures look pretty amazing. So one of the things
you haven't seen it from the outside?
No.
Okay.
Well, they claim it's finally going to be done in a few years. So maybe go in a couple of years.
I've got one quick question, I guess, about that. And then the rest of the tour in general. One of the things ABD is really good is storytelling, Violet. So did they kind of weave that in as far as being able to explain the architecture to make it interesting, not just to you because I'll be honest, art and architecture is not really my thing, but when you see something sometimes that really hits you, it is pretty amazing. So I totally appreciate why people appreciate it the way they do. But were the guides able to bring that appreciation to you and the way they kind of presented it to you?
Yeah, we had an expert guide for that, and she was very good. They kind of explained there were like 3 parts of the church, only 2 that had really been built. And they told about how he started designing it and how he wanted it to be built and how they were still sticking to his original plan. So I feel like I learned a lot and kept me engaged. We had some time to explore, to look at some stuff.
That's one thing ABD does really well is you have your main 2 guides, which are always good and very personable and great. But they find the local guides they bring in tend to be really terrific. We had our guide in Rome, for instance, was really fabulous. I mean, she was incredible. So, I mean, we don't always retain everything because it's so much information coming in at you. But when you're there listening to it, it really keeps you engaged pretty well, I think, despite the heat.
I think it sounds like you hit a lot of the highlights. Obviously, it was a very short trip.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very short escape. Ha, look at that. Mm-hmm. But it seemed like it timed itself perfectly to your cruise. Are you happy that you guys made this choice?
I think we are because, like I said, we did a couple things on our own. Like we saw some of Gaudi's houses like Casa Batlló and on our own. We did a meal on our own. And actually, I enjoyed Spanish food much more than I anticipated. And it made us want to go back and do a larger tour of Spain. So I think it accomplished that, which was great. And we would have never gone to Montserrat on our own because it's sort of a pain to get there. You have to drive and take a train and take a cable car. Mm. And it was beautiful, but that's something, for instance, I wouldn't have done on my own because it's just a lot of work to plan that with kids sometimes.
I was going to say, just quickly for people who haven't been to Montserrat, what is Montserrat?
It's, I want to say, an abbey, technically. And it's up sort of in the countryside. And I mean, it's gorgeous. The views are amazing. They have a little museum there. And you go from being in this, a city, an urban center of Barcelona to this sort of majestic, there's mountains and trees. And I mean, it's pretty incredible. And it's not that far out of the city, but like I said, it takes some transportation coordination and to have kind of the ease of ABD. Like, for instance, we took the train and the cable car getting up, and then they drove us down, which was great after you're tired and you've spent the day there. And just sort of everything runs typically, I mean, not always, but typically very smoothly with ABD. And it just takes a lot of the hassle out of the travel planning.
I have some questions about ABD with regard to Violet's motion sickness. Do they allow you maybe a closer seat on the bus for stuff like that? How do you guys make known that that's an issue? Do you do it ahead of time or just once you're on the ship or the tour?
We definitely let them know ahead of time. Normally get in the front of the line and sit in the front. Sometimes if it's a long drive, I'll either take Dramamine or request to sit like right up front with them because helping to see the window normally helps me a lot. But normally if it exceeds like 45 minutes, I'll just have to take Dramamine because...
Yeah. Well, usually what I do is when I first meet the guides, I say, listen, because they always ask, do you have any concerns or questions? And then so we have a couple of food allergies. We double check that they know that. And then we say, hey, we have somebody who's very motion sickness prone. Obviously, we kind of usually ask the day before, how long is the transport going to be? So we know if we have to Dramamine her. And then we usually there'll be us and maybe one other family will have the same issue where we say, hey, we're going to put at least her in near the front. And then the Montserrat day, she and her dad actually sat out because she hadn't slept really the night before. I think she just hadn't adjusted to the time yet. And so between being really tired and that being a lot of travel, they just ended up kind of walking around the city on their own. And then we met them for the afternoon activities. So ABD is pretty flexible, when working with you. And same thing with when we were on the Italy week Chris's folks, they'd had COVID maybe a couple months before, and I think they're still just not quite totally recovered physically. So there were activities on quite a few days they sat out just because they just didn't want to get too overexhausted.
And then I have another like administrative ABD type question. So on the regular escape or the regular ABD, like week-long tours, they gave out pins during the tours. Now they send those in advance for a week-long tour. So if you have a trip that starts like 2 weeks before, does ABD know that to get you your documents before so that it's not arriving at your house when you're traveling? And for a short escape, did they still send you out pre-arrival information and or your pins?
Yeah, we got everything ahead of time. It did all, I was wondering if it would all make it. It did. I really don't like that. I mean, I'm hoping with the pins, they go back to what they had, because it was always really fun to, they would talk about the pin and hand them out, and it was much more engaging versus now we bring them, but we just don't tend to, you're busy and other things are going on. So you just don't tend to, it doesn't become quite as a memorable, part of the trip. So I'm really hoping they go back to handing those out during the trip.
Were you able to ask your guides about that aspect? Like, is this coming back? Or are they trying to just do that to make it one less thing they need to be doing during the tour?
I don't remember if I specifically asked, but I'm pretty sure I would have gotten the answer. Oh, we don't know about that. So, because I did ask them, because you also received one that says which number ABD this is for you. And they sent us the same ones for Barcelona and Italy, even though Italy should have been one ahead. And so I asked them about that, and they were like, oh, we don't have anything to do with that. We don't know. So
did you call ABD when you got back?
I have not gotten them yet. So we'll see if I do.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay. So then your tour is kind of over and you go on the Disney Magic. Now, the great thing about a short escape or any ABD trip that lines up with a Disney cruise in Europe is that they will actually handle your transfer to the cruise ship. So I assume that they handled that and that was all seamless for you.
Yeah, that worked well. We had about 4 or 5 families that were going on to the cruise from the short escape. And they drove us out there maybe 9:30-ish. And they sort of walked us up to the line to enter the port. It's interesting because I've heard a lot of difficulties, it sounds like, from you guys and Roped Up Radio, et cetera, about boarding. Maybe it was in Civitavecchia. We had port arrival times. We had 2 connecting rooms because, again, I had a lot of extra DCL credit to use. And so one room had 10 a.m., one had 10:15. So we got in line. We sort of had a separate line. And they held us because it was like 10:05. And so they held us for the 10 minutes. And there was another couple going on the cruise whose port arrival time was like 2 p.m. So I was really worried about them. But we saw them not that long after. So they must have relaxed it a bit. But we got in there and it actually ran pretty smoothly.
I thought that was the fastest maybe it had ever happened.
Because we've been on a couple cruises since the restart. And they tested us. We sat there maybe 15 minutes.
It's really quick.
And we got it back.
For hours, but
yeah. So everybody was obviously very nervous because that was sort of a big. We hadn't learned yet that they were getting ready for the testing to go home, or no, maybe they just announced that.
No, that was in Rome.
Okay.
So Jen, this cruise takes you from Barcelona to Civitavecchia, where you pick up your Italy ABD. Had you guys, had you guys cruised one of these Mediterranean excursions or Mediterranean itineraries before?
Not on Disney. We'd only been on Celebrity to Greece. That was because Disney canceled last year.
Okay. So I'm kind of curious how you guys attacked it. Our kids have gotten older. They're roughly about the same age as your kids. And we were able to really do a lot this time without as much downtime as before. But what we ended up doing was really just picking maybe one thing in the evening, especially letting the kids do what they wanted to do in the evenings after the excursions that we did. And that really helped everybody kind of get their own space, kind of get recuperated and ready to go the next day. How did you kind of look at how you were going to spend your time on the ship and then do the port excursions?
We spent pretty long days on the port excursions, and we did a combination of things I arranged on my own and things through Disney, partially because Disney wasn't offering a ton. But in the evenings, I think our kids are not usually into the kids clubs. So Violet and her dad
We do a lot of the game shows.
Yeah. They love the game shows and the activities. Garrett did some of that. I mean, we did a little karaoke. We went to some of the shows, but not all of them. So yeah, we were pretty chill in the evenings, but we're pretty into the game show.
We're pretty into the game shows. I went to at least half of them.
Yeah.
Probably. So do you participate in them or do you just watch them?
We try to participate in them. We don't always get picked. But yeah, my dad, normally they ask, someone, I don't know, sing along to Let It Go, or they have some kind of thing where whoever does it like the biggest wins. My dad will get up there and do, I don't know, the biggest rendition of whatever they ask for. So
he's willing to embarrass himself for his daughter.
Yeah. I think one time they asked, raise your hands really high, start jumping up and down. We normally do pretty well.
Yeah. He hams it up pretty good. So did you guys do Generation Quest?
You've been chasing.
There's this one game that we've been playing, like, I don't know, every cruise ship we've ever been on. It's like my favorite game, but we've never won. We're really bad at it. I forget what it's called. And we finally won one.
How well do you know your family?
Yeah, we're really, really bad at it. We're so bad. And we got some bad questions wrong, but we still won. And that was... we got these little medals and I wrote like the date and everything. I'm so happy.
Those are the hardest medals to win. I'm telling you, it's tough to win medals on a Disney cruise.
This was their white whale and they finally accomplished it. So that was a great moment.
I love it. Yeah. On Awaken, Alex, our youngest, did How Well Do You Know Your Family? And it was funny because it's like she gave the right answers and he was like totally on a different planet on that one. So it was kind of funny to see where their brains kind of went with it. So I love that game and Generation Quest.
Yeah, but and then the port excursions, it was interesting. I think I ended up coming down on the side of, we'd always been nervous, I think, about planning our own because of, the confidence of getting on the ship and everything. But we did a couple on our own that actually I think were our favorite, just because, when it's just you can really tailor the day and you're not sort of at the mercy of a really big group. I think you guys talked a little bit about that on your trip. I
think Europe is, I don't know. I feel like in a lot of ways, it's pretty easy to kind of come up with your own things to do in the ports and do it. And then once, especially after you've been there at least once and you kind of get a little bit more comfortable with it, you start to realize that, 40 to 50 people on a bus really slows things down. You really don't get to do as much.
One thing I would maybe suggest for people, if they're going to Europe and they don't want a large bus tour, is to take the time to call Disney to ask for which tours have a lower capacity. Because you can get that when you're on board, but you can't cancel or move your excursions typically once you're on board. So you don't want to necessarily commit to that beforehand. So that could just be something you could do. They have it in their files. They have it in the back end. I wish they would just share more to say, yes, this one is a smaller group so that people can make that informed decision if they want. And honestly, if you are a well-traveled person, then I think doing Europe on your own is doable. But even like our ABDCD tour that we did with our group in Naples, we made a couple of mistakes because the trains had changed and some things had happened. And I feel like if you weren't as well traveled, that either could have made a person quite nervous or even getting out of the train station, sometimes you need to have a little bit of travel to even be able to figure out how to do that.
We strike a middle ground. I usually arrange a private tour where they have to handle the transport, right?
Yeah.
Unless we're just walking. I mean, I can use Google Maps and walk around a city, but
sure.
Especially because Chris, dad, he gets very nervous about, transport and getting
anywhere.
Yeah, he just doesn't like having to deal with that part of it. And I will say I like the private tours, having done some stuff on our own too. I like being able to listen to the guide and learn about the city without having to be constantly looking at my phone or in a guidebook and reading and then answering the questions that I don't know much about for the kids. And it allows the parents to kind of be engaged too and take the stress out without, while the kids can ask questions and be entertained too. So
what private tours did you pick for your Med cruise?
Well, we did a mix. The Villefranche day we did through Disney.
Villefranche. You did a tour through Disney to Nice. What did they have you do?
It was pretty relaxed. We took basically that was a tender port, which I don't think it was necessarily supposed to be, but we ended up having.
No, it always is.
Oh, is it? Okay. So they tendered us for our transport to Nice, basically. and we took a short bus ride, and then we walked around Nice a little bit. Our guide gave us some info, and then she sort of let us walk around on our own. So it was a good mix of hearing a little bit about the city, and then getting to kind of walk around the market. We got snacks. It was beautiful weather, and got some gelato. And then she drove us up to Ez, which was beautiful, but it was pretty crowded by the time we got up there, and it was hot. So we sort of did a little bit of the walk, go all the way up, and then came back down, and we were like, okay, we're good. So it was like a little bit shorter day. So it was sort of a good balance for the kids, and not too wild, since we knew we were going to have some long days coming up.
So from Villafranca, you guys head over to Genoa. What did you guys have planned there?
We arranged a private tour with a guide. It was funny because there was another family of maybe 6 or 7 from the ship who we'd seen around at the game shows, and they ended up being with us. So it was sort of our 2 families. And I wouldn't say I didn't love Genoa, but the guide was great. He was pretty engaging. We had a nice lunch, sort of we're walking around, and it was he was going to walk for 6-7 hours. So maybe it was a long day.
5.
So after about 5 hours, and that included lunch, obviously, and sitting, but we were kind of like, okay, we're good. We're getting tired. We're not that far from the ship, so we're going to walk back. And actually the other family, they stayed on, but 4 or 5 hours was enough for us. And then we kind of got to head back. So again, it was a lot of, you're very flexible because you've got a fairly small group. And so we headed back to the ship. It was probably about 2 or 3 p.m. and then took some time to relax.
Yeah, I'm sure Violet wanted to prepare, now that she'd met her competition, how she was going to beat him that night in the game shows, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just kidding. I'll cut that out. My smart alecky self.
But I did participate, and she did beat them, actually.
And did we ever mention, I don't think we ever mentioned, we talked about it pre-show, but I don't think we mentioned during the show. So traveling with you up until your second ABD, Jen, you and your husband, and then your children are 14 years old and 10 years old. So just to make sure that made it into the show, because I'm not sure it did. So people with, younger kids and kids in these age ranges can see, what other kids can be capable of.
Oh, no, I was just going to say Garrett's 10. So he's actually pretty good about walking around, and clearly is taking in some information, because he'll say things to me later in the day. I'm like, oh, wow, he paid attention. But
that's awesome. That
being said, he likes being on the ship. He needs, some downtime, just like most kids that age.
So from Genoa, you go to Livorno, which is your opportunity to go to Florence. And what did you guys have planned there?
Well, I guess 2 points. We didn't want to go to Florence, A, because we were going to be there on the land ABD. And then 2, though any of the stops, it was the same reason we didn't go to Milan and Genoa. We can't really sit on a bus for 2 hours each way. But for Violet's motion sickness, and just because that's a lot of bus time. So we had planned this one. We ended up with, again, because I had these credits sitting on my account from all these cruises that had been canceled and delayed. We decided to do one private tour through Disney, which was crazy expensive, but it was well done. We were met when we got off the boat by a private driver. And we went first to Pisa. We'd heard mixed things about Pisa, but for us, it was great because we got there first thing in the morning. So it wasn't crowded. It wasn't hot. We walked around, kind of saw the buildings.
You took your picture?
In the tower, because I'd reserved a slot. We took the pictures. I'd reserved a slot ahead of time in the tower. I'd asked them, hey, when are we going to be at Pisa, so I could get the tickets. So that was really great. But even going up in the tower made Chris and Violet a little motion sick because you're leaning. And then we drove over to Lucca, and we spent a little time in Lucca walking around. Was that all we did that day? Do you remember?
Yeah, we had the lady, we had I'd say about 30 minutes of tour at the very end, walking around Lucca. Before that, we just grabbed lunch.
That's true.
I learned that you can't have bubble tea in Italy.
No.
It's not the place to do it. And
Fi loves bubble tea.
I love bubble tea, and I tried to get bubble tea.
It is not good in Italy. But yeah, we had a great time just sort of walking around Lucca. And again, because it's just you and a driver, you can sort of tailor it as you like. So it was a pretty relaxing day.
So before we get to Naples, your final stop, you guys had several meals, not only in Spain. You said you really enjoyed this food in Spain, and I'm sure you could have that in your ABDs. What was your overall thoughts of the food in Italy? I mean, that's one of the places that I know our family really enjoys. The food is so fresh, it seems like. What were your guys' experiences?
The food was amazing. Yeah. I mean, I ate a lot of, I'd say about half my diet at home is Trader Joe's frozen pasta, which is, good and everything.
I'm not much of a cook.
But yeah, so Dad will pop it in the microwave or whatever it goes in, and I'll just eat that for dinner pretty much every day. But then I went to Italy and the pasta's all amazing and fresh, and they roll it and make
al dente.
Al dente, yeah. So it was very different. It was really good.
So the one thing I will give my children is they are very adventurous eaters. Pasta obviously appeals to everybody, but no matter where we go, they'll try everything. So that always makes it worthwhile. We always do a food tour in every city we go to pretty much, because it's sort of a great way just to enjoy yourself and get to talk to people and kind of see a little bit of the city. So for instance, when we landed Rome, that was the first thing we did. We did a food tour on our own while we were waiting for the ABD to start. And that was great.
Oh, so much to unpack in these comments. Okay. So first of all, earlier on the recording, you had mentioned that you have a couple of food allergies in your group. What are your food allergies?
I'm allergic to, mine's very complicated, hard to deal with. So I'm allergic to about half of all nuts. Can eat peanuts, hazelnuts, almonds, I think. Cannot eat walnuts, pecans, pistachios. Okay. It's very hard because I can't say nuts because I like peanuts and hazelnuts. I eat peanut butter and Nutella all the time. But it's hard because if I do say nuts, then I can't really eat anything. And then if I don't say nuts, then there's some walnut hidden in a cookie that I accidentally eat. So I have to
it's challenging.
Especially hard because of the language barrier. So it's hard to get through. So normally we try to tell our guides, or if we have someone who speaks English, like a tour guide, I try to tell them, just these nuts. But Dad's is much easier to deal with. My dad has a shellfish allergy. It's just shellfish, can't eat shellfish. So that's much easier to deal with, I think.
Yeah, that's true.
So in your family, it's certain nuts and shellfish. Is that okay?
Garrett and I don't have any allergies, but they do.
So then how did that work and how did you pick the food tour that you ended up doing? And how did you, who did you book that through? And how did you confirm your allergies ahead of time? Things like that.
Yeah, I usually just find, I don't tend to use individuals so much for that. I will use a company, I think this one was maybe Secret Food Tours. And so you're booking, they have set tours depending on the time of the day. And for this one, it ended up being us and that same family in Genoa, even just by chance. And then usually when you book it, you can type in ahead of time, hey, these are my allergies. Because for instance, with Violet, it often is a problem with desserts. There's a lot of nuts and desserts. And, but with
at least there's
challenging, mainly because of language barriers. But
one time I got pizza and they put walnuts all over a regular, just a cheese pizza, and they put walnuts all over it.
So we didn't anticipate that.
Yeah, I wouldn't have anticipated that. Correct.
Yeah, it's a challenge. Obviously Disney's, the ABDs tend to be very good about, you tell them ahead of time, and then they are pretty good with any restaurant you eat at through ABD. They're constantly running back and forth to the chef saying, hey, because there's usually a mix of allergies in the tour group. So the guides, I always feel for them. It's a challenge.
I mean, what I think they do a really good job of is sometimes I do something and, I can't eat something still have nuts and I just won't get to eat it. But normally they're really good about telling the kitchen ahead of time so I can get the same thing just without pecans on it or something.
Or an alternative dessert.
Or an alternative. They're pretty good about, because sometimes I can't eat half the stuff, so I just don't eat as much as everyone else, but they're good about bringing me the same thing just without the nuts.
It's tough for kids. Obviously, Chris, he's fine, but...
Well, I do feel for Chris because the mussels I had in Italy were some of the most amazing mussels I've ever had.
Oh, so yeah. Garrett loves mussels, my son.
I can't eat really mussels or oysters either.
Yeah, you don't.
Well, let's move on to your final port then is Naples. So many different things to do in Naples. You guys had a pretty full day. Could you kind of go over what you guys did there?
Yeah, we did a private tour. It was pretty
long day.
It was a long day. We gave Violet Dramamine at the beginning, and luckily she passed out because it was he drove us first to Positano, which is a long, windy drive, and we were all a little bit nauseous. when we got there, it's beautiful. I mean, I see why it's such a big destination, even though they're about to, I think, significantly curtail tourism, because it's one road in and out and it's jammed with cars. So we got pretty lucky. We went first thing in the morning before it got too busy. That was the only day we had a little bit of rain, but it was still really nice. And we just spent a little time there. And then he drove us over to Sorrento, where we got some gelato and then walked around a little bit. And then we went to Pompeii and had lunch, had a great tour of Pompeii. I mean, really enjoyed it because the kids are familiar with that from school. So that was, we thought about going to, Vesuvius and Herculaneum, but Pompeii is, it's so familiar to them from school that I really wanted to go. So, and it was a great tour guide too. He was a lot of fun.
Who did you book this tour through?
I can't remember if I got the name from Rick Steves or I just found it searching the internet, but it's Gaetano. I think he's like a guy who's been doing it for 4 generations. And we got his son in the name of Chiro, who was really fun because he was a younger guy. And so very energetic, and
it was like the most entertaining. It was pretty long, but I was very into it. Like normally after, 2 hours or so, like if it exceeds 2 hours, I always get a little tired and start zoning out, but it was very engaging.
He was very engaging. Yeah. So we would recommend them for sure. Gaetano Manfredi may have been his name. So like I said, his son was terrific. So
Violet, what did you like about Pompeii?
It was really amazing because, I really expected it just to be a pile of ashes. Like they're really I know it was buried alive, so a lot of the structures are still standing, but I really expect everything to be unrecognizable. Went to what used to be a spa and what used to be like a bakery, and it still looks like a bakery. Like you could tell where the oven was and where the tables were. And then there was a museum, and he was very good about telling us what was amazing is a lot of things that we use now were invented or started to be used in Pompeii. So we would tell us, this is when they started using sidewalks, and we still use sidewalks, and this is why they started using sidewalks. So it was very interesting.
It was engaging, yeah. And we really got pretty lucky. The weather wasn't because I'd heard obviously it was terribly hot, and I was worried because they had us there in the afternoon. But we got pretty lucky. It was fairly overcast, and you had a breeze, and I think we were there in between 2 big heat waves in Italy. So it kind of timed well.
I love the idea of being able to kind of split up the ABD with the cruise. We've really enjoyed, although we haven't done that. We've enjoyed spending a week, kind of exploring Italy or Europe ourselves, and then doing a cruise. We're going to do the opposite next year, cruise and then explore for ourselves. So from there, after, getting off the Magic, you guys head into an ABD through Italy. They kind of move your stuff over to the hotel in Rome. Can you talk about the overview of what you're going to be able to experience on the ABD in Italy?
Yeah, we generally enjoy spending a few days on our own in a city. Then it's great to have the ABD and have some everything done for you, and then spending a few days on the back end if we can. Just depends on, work schedules and school schedules, obviously, how much time we can get. But
so what were you guys looking forward to?
I think the food was a big part of Italy. And then just for me, seeing Rome and Florence and Venice, I mean, these cities that you've heard about your whole life and read about, and, seeing the incredible sights and things you'd seen in movies. So we were just really excited. I mean, obviously Chris's family's, their heritage is based in Italy. Their, his parents, his mom particularly, is Italian. And so we were meeting up with them there, which was exciting, after several years of COVID, and spending time with our group was a lot of fun. It was a fun group of people.
How big was the group?
We had a full tour. I want to say it was close to 40. We had a guide from Italy, obviously, and then I don't remember where our other guide may be from Hawaii, I think. But they clearly had been doing this a long time. They were really seasoned guides. It was a fun group. We had a kid there who was leave him anonymous for his sake, but he was a child actor. So that was sort of funny because a lot of people recognized him. We did not know him at a time, but he was a sweet kid to get to know, and just a good variety of people. I mean, we have people of all ages and all backgrounds, and it was a fun mix of people.
Now, at this point, before we even get fully into this tour, at this point, you had already traveled for 10 days. So what happens with laundry over a 10-day period before you start an 8-day ABD?
That's an excellent question. We did a lot of laundry on the ship.
Okay.
we got lucky because the cruise was in the middle. So I did laundry when we first got on the ship, and I did laundry right before we got off the ship.
You didn't even have a lot of days to do laundry. So you'd be like going to a port and then jamming out some laundry on the same day?
Well, I did laundry the day we boarded.
Okay.
I want to say our sea day was near the end. It was right before Naples.
So I'm going to just throw this out for anybody that's going to Europe, or maybe I learned my lesson on this one with the laundry, because we tried to do the laundry right away too when we first got on the ship, and it was like a madhouse down there. Mm-hmm. I would say if you got second seating, wait till 5:30 and go when everybody goes, because it just cleared out. So don't do it right away when you think you've got time. You're going to beat everybody, because you're not, because everybody else is going to be down there. Wait till 5:30. Everybody goes to dinner, and then there's plenty of washers and dryers. So.
Yeah, you're right. At least the sea day, I was doing it during dinner, because I remember that was our one day we went to Palo, and I left like during the meal to switch to dry, because I didn't want, people to get upset that I was leaving. Right.
And then Anthony, who was on our Greek Isles cruise, I think he did laundry at like 5 a.m. and said it was completely empty or something.
I'm not getting up at 5 a.m.
No,
that's not me.
Well, let's move into the ABD. I guess one other quick question, which we could touch on at any point, but Violet, how are the ABDs for you? Do you find that you connect with a lot of the kids on it? Have you been able to have a good time as a group with the kids, or do you end up spending more time with your family?
I definitely spend more time with the adults than the kids, because I find that, I don't know, I get along better with either a very select kind of kid or adults normally. And there was one day, I remember, they separated the teenagers, the kids, and the adults. So the kids did like a show to taste, and the teenagers did like a little bit of the wine tasting, and then the adults did the wine tasting. It was 2 hours, and we all awkwardly stared at each other and said nothing for 2 hours. It was like,
oh no,
silent. This poor girl, I think she was 18. She's the oldest of all. She kept asking these questions, and she's like, "What's your name?" We'd all go around and say her name, silent for another 30 minutes. "Where are you from?" We'd all go say where we're from, silent for another 30 minutes. It's the most awkward experience I've ever had. So I think it's hard, because it's hard to get to know some of the kids.
I think the problem was the two guides. Usually the guides are good about facilitating things like that, but the two guides both went with the kids. And then they had the teens in the room, the adults sitting together, but the teens, at least this group of teens were not very, but I'm sure it's a long couple of hours for a while.
Well, let's turn to Rome then. A city you're excited to see so many different things, from the Vatican to the Colosseum. What were some of your experiences, and what were the memorable ones that you took away from it?
Well, we loved our food tour when we first arrived, which is something I'd arranged on our own. And then we went to they had to rearrange the itinerary some, but we went to the Vatican that evening, which was enjoyable. I mean, we saw
St. Peter.
Yeah, we saw St. Peter's Basilica. But I think the next morning was the highlight. We got up super early.
Like 3 a.m.
Like 4 a.m. or something insane.
Wow.
But we got to go to the Sistine Chapel before everybody else. So you're literally the only people there. You're the only people in the museums there. So it is incredible. The kids all got to unlock the doors with the keys. And then you're standing in the Sistine Chapel, just, your group. So, I mean, I think even the most jaded among us, we've said it's incredible. And you can't help but really feeling, I think, awed when you're there. So, even though it was tiring, it was definitely worth it. And that was the only morning like that. Yeah. That was insane.
I was surprised. I thought, I'd be all upset because I'd be tired. And normally, we went to a lot of churches, and I thought, it's going to be another church. But I thought it was really, really enjoyable.
Yeah, that was pretty stunning. They used to go at night, I think, after hours, but they've switched it to this early morning, and it did work well.
Hopefully they give you good breakfast.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we had breakfast. Beforehand, they had some bites in the hotel, and then we had breakfast on the grounds of the chapel museums afterwards. And then we did sort of a walking tour of Rome where we saw, I always get this wrong, is it the
Parthenon?
Parthenon, thank you. Parthenon and the Trevi Fountain and sort of the major highlights. And that was really enjoyable. And then people were pretty tired.
So was there a nap time?
Chris and Garrett relaxed in the hotel. Violet and I went walking around looking for bubble tea with variable success.
Well, it's good to know that Italy's not great at everything. So as much as I love the food there and stuff like that, it makes you need to go someplace else, I guess, for bubble tea. Well, from there, you guys head to Tuscany, where you're going to spend some time out in Tuscany and Florence. How did they get, I'm assuming you took a bus out there. What were those days like?
Yeah, it was a pretty long drive out there, but we stopped midday in Orvieto, which we did not have any preconceived notions about, but it was wonderful. I mean, we had a great meal in like a cellar, a wine cave.
Yeah, you had Mom loved the chicken there. She had like 5 chickens.
I just kept eating the chicken. It's like, how is chicken so good? But yeah, I ate a lot of chicken. And then we walked around and shopped and had gelato. We had gelato pretty much every place, everywhere we stopped in Italy. And it was just beautiful. It was a gorgeous day and a great stop kind of in the middle of the drive.
Yeah.
And then we had our hotel was just sort of in the Tuscan countryside, which was really lovely. And the next day we went to a family farm in Tuscany and we made pasta. That was a lot of
olive
fun.
Oil.
That's what ABD does very well, because when I plan a trip, I tend to do a lot of touring and a lot of museums and historical sites, and ABD is very good about getting those activities incorporated in that the whole family will like the pasta making, and becomes very memorable.
Can I ask a question about that pasta making?
Mm-hmm.
Was there anybody on your tour gluten-free, and did they provide them with a gluten-free pasta at the end for them to eat?
That's a good question. I do not remember.
I'm not sure if anyone was gluten-free, but we were not allowed to eat our own pasta because, it was a disaster for most people. But it was definitely a disaster for me and my dad. My dad cracked the egg all over his clothes, my hands. They were pretty careful about it. So I feel like it would have been okay.
Because I know Violet, they had to substitute a couple different things throughout the trip for her. But yeah, the pasta making was a lot of fun. You got to make all your own shapes and sizes and things. And then we got served a professional pasta lunch. But they had farm animals there. I mean, people were petting the cows. And so it was, just sort of a neat diversion from all the history and the grandiosity, I guess.
It's a good, relaxing day.
Yeah.
But it seems like they did a really good job of that, giving you the history and having those long days, but then also giving you the culture in a way to kind of slow down, rejuvenate before you head to Florence, which is kind of a big day too. What did you guys think of Florence?
It was probably of Italy, my favorite city. It was really beautiful. And it's really unique. It's like nowhere else sort of.
Yeah, we really enjoyed it. I was a little nervous because we only had one day. They basically bussed us out there and we were there all day. And then you could choose to come back around 6 or 9 p.m. So we
did 9.
We said 9. I mean, it was a long day, but we saw, the David, we toured the Medici. What is the Medici Palace? Is that? Yeah.
I was really hot.
Yeah. I got warm in there, but the guides were all great. And then we spent some time on our own walking around and having gelato, of course, had a great meal, a really fabulous meal there.
The last meal, we got a pasta sampling and a steak sampling. The pastas were all great. There was one steak, it's like the balsamic steak, and it was like the best steak I've ever had.
We had the Florentine steak, with the different, they had served one with like a balsamic glaze and one had a blueberry glaze, and it was fabulous.
It was really good.
We ate well.
So you talk about the Vatican, being able to go to the Sistine Chapel, they get you in there early. When you go to someplace like the Duomo in Florence, do they do the same kind of thing? Not that they're going to get you in early, but do they have like separate lines that you guys can get into to get into and out of there quickly? Or are you kind of with all the rest of us?
It was they had a reserved time entry, but you were entering with the crowd. So, but they timed it pretty well. I mean, we had to be broken down into smaller groups. And so they had a couple of different guides. But considering, it's crowded, a place like that, it's busy, it worked pretty smoothly. We just had to be broken down into maybe groups of 10 to get in and out of there. And
exactly 9 groups.
9. Yeah. So they had a limit of 9. So it was a little, we, for instance, were
last.
I think the last group.
Last.
And so our group was smaller.
It was just us. So it's just actually good because we were the only ones.
Just our family of 6, 4. I guess because
the grandparents
had to stay out because it was such a long day. But yeah, they make sure things run pretty smoothly. The only time I think I felt maybe uncomfortable was when we were waiting to enter the Basilica at the Vatican because it was hot. It was late afternoon and we were all standing in the sun in the line. But
besides that,
that was about it. Yeah. The Colosseum was well run. We did that first thing in the morning on our day that we departed Rome. So that was done well. We were there early before the crowd.
That's good. I mean, they do it so often. I'm sure they've got their timing down pretty well done when the crowds generally are there and not. So from there, you guys finish off in a city that we got to visit again, Venice, which is kind of a unique city. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on Venice. Violet, did you like Venice?
I was surprised. I thought the city itself was amazing. I was really into one of my favorite shows is called Blown Away, where they like blow glass into awesome stuff. We saw this guy and he made this awesome glass horse in like a minute. It was amazing.
Oh my God.
But in general, the boats was very hard for me.
The boats were hard. Yeah.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah. So that was a challenge because you hate to give them Dramamine for a 10-minute boat ride. But on the other hand, you don't want her sick every time. She has to, because the one they chose a hotel that was on an island all by itself, basically. So we always had to boat to get in and out of the hotel.
It was a long boat ride. For
a family like ours, which likes to just walk around, on our downtime and explore, it was a challenge. We ended up finally figuring out that we could we figured out we could pay, but take the city ferry, which would go right across from our island to the main island for 5 minutes, right? Versus the free hotel shuttle would drop you off more in the center of the main island, but it was 25 minutes of being on a boat.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that took us like a day or two to realize. So that was a little bit of a challenge, but we liked the city itself. I mean, it's sort of a labyrinth of chaos, but we enjoyed really walking around Venice. We spent an extra day there on our own. And we got that was another thing Disney did, that was great for families, is we had a mask making activity where everybody got to pick out and paint and decorate their own mask, carnival mask. And so that was a lot of fun for the kids, I think. And for Dad.
Did you wear it at a dinner that night then?
We had a big ending dinner, and they said we were going to be on a pirate ship. So I expected this giant ship. We were going to take a short ride across, and it'd be like 5 minutes. We went for 3 hours. It was tiny, and I had a lot of trim, but it was okay. We did have the chance to wear them. I chose not to because it impeded my breathing.
Yeah.
So it didn't help me, but you could. And I really did like making the masks, and they got them to us really quickly in good condition. Yeah. So it was good.
The pirate ship was a big hit with everybody, but maybe Violet, because like I said, she's pretty motion sensitive. But once we got going, it was very smooth because they just basically sailed around the islands. But in the beginning, when you're waiting for them to get going and it's sitting there kind of rocking, that's the challenging part for us.
So a lot of things to see in Venice. What were some of the highlights that stood out to you guys that you got to experience?
For me, it's got to be the glass. I was so super interested in that. Yeah. I just went from glass shop to glass shop to glass.
I think that our highlight, that was a great shopping spot for us. Mm-hmm. There were so many little souvenirs that the kids enjoyed, picking out the little glass sculptures. And it was just a fun city to walk around. And we kind of just liked getting lost. We kept trying to use Google Maps and then getting turned around, but that's sort of part of the fun of it. We knew we'd eventually figure out how to get back to our hotel. So, but those are kind of the moments when you're on your own. And by then we'd had a lot of, formal tours. And so it was just sort of fun to explore.
Even if you don't really think about the water, like if you just completely discount the water, the city itself was still very beautiful and unique and still very charming.
Yeah. Just like nowhere you've ever been, I think, right? It's its own thing.
I feel like there's like lots of nooks and crannies in that city. I remember after we got done eating, we walked around just recently and went down the street, and all of a sudden the street ended, and it was just a beautiful bridge that went up and over one of the canals. It was just kind of like hidden, that you wouldn't know was there unless you were, kind of exploring like that. Just like so many, beautiful little sites like that.
Yeah, we loved the bridges. I mean, like I said, as long as we could cross the islands by bridge, we were fine. It was when they made us take a boat that we had dropped.
So, wow, what a trip from Spain through the Mediterranean and the Disney Magic, and then through Italy. It sounds like you guys spent an extra day by yourselves. Did you stay at the same hotel that Disney provided while you're in Venice?
We did, just out of ease. We just stayed one more night. I'd say that last day I think just because it'd been such a long trip, a couple of us were beginning to feel a little under the weather. Violet had a little bit of a stomach bug. And so we had planned to do a little bit more that day than we did, but we ended up kind of walking around on our own, touring for a while. And then we ended up just coming back and resting at the hotel because we were starting to feel a little worn down. and knew we had a big travel day the last day.
Well, what just an amazing trip. I think I already said that, as far as, going from Spain through the Mediterranean and then up through Italy to Venice and then back. Kind of looking back on this, I want to get your take, Violet. What would be some of your tips that you would give kids your age as they prepare to go, either to go to spend time in Europe, go on a cruise, or through Adventures by Disney? What are some of the tips that you'd give kids your age?
Yeah, I definitely have fear of missing out, but there are certain things that, it's okay to sit one or two things out, especially when you're a kid, because I think eventually it's hard to go to every museum when you're going to like 5 or 6 places every day. So don't be afraid to take a break. I'd also say it's kind of contradictory, but don't be afraid to take a break, but also don't spend too much time in the hotel. Like there are definitely some things that you have to go see, and you have to definitely be a kid that's energetic and okay with doing a lot of activity, because I think that it's hard to do 3 weeks anytime, but you have to be in it. You can't, if your parent's going to take their kid on a 3-week trip, you have to make sure your kid's, interested in history. And another thing is, I think especially with the Adventure by Disney and the cruise, there's plenty of fun activities, but there's also a lot of historical stuff and informational stuff. So I think on some stuff, it's easy to, get bored or turned around. So always pick out what you want to do and what you think you can skip. I'd say mostly just figure out what part of the trip you want to do and what part.
Yeah. I mean, I think with your brother, when you have a younger kid, he's 10, once we got him out and onto the activity, he did fine. It was just sometimes that barrier to entry, and then giving them some time in the afternoon or evening to unwind.
One thing I'm very bad about is I don't like one pair of shorts. I always wear jeans and cardigans everywhere. You have to dress for the weather. It's going to be hot. You have to bring t-shirts, sunscreen, shorts, good shoes. My mom always brings what I like to call her medical clompers, which are big black shoes that you can't move in. Bring hiking shoes or at least sneakers.
I'm bad about packing for myself.
You're worried about the kids and everybody else, right?
And then you forget to pack sneakers, which I seem to do every time.
Anna Wake's in the same boat. So, Jen, how about your perspective looking back on this? I don't want to say, how would you do it differently or anything like that, but what were some of the things that you took away that you really enjoyed and maybe you learned from?
Yeah, I think I learned that on the cruises, I'm not going to be afraid to book a private tour through a separate company on my own, both because honestly, they're much cheaper than Disney's excursions. And then 2, because I now feel comfortable that, hey, we're going to get back to the ship. We always told the private tour guide if the sail away time was 6 p.m., we're like, we want to be back by 4 p.m. Just because even if it ran a little over, then you knew you still had some breathing room. And then you can just tailor it a lot more to your family. Like if Violet's having a hard time, we can up and take a break, for her motion sickness. Or if Garrett's getting tired, we can pare things back a little bit. So that was a good lesson. And then I tend to be somebody, who's just, I'm very type A, I want plan, know what we're doing, every hour of the day. And then I have to sort of fight that urge and balance it with knowing that the kids need, and dad needs some downtime.
And sometimes it's hard to do, but sometimes some of those best moments are the ones that are unplanned and you end up doing something that you didn't even really expect you were going to do, and they end up being really memorable. So
I do have one more question. You did ABD sort of obviously during this pandemic-y time, right? So things are could have been slightly different. Did you feel that anything, because you had done ABD trips before, do you feel like anything was missing, or besides the pins not being given out of the trip, was there anything does that question make sense? Do you feel like anything was missing, or any of the magic wasn't there or anything like that?
No, not at this point. I mean, like I said, the pin thing, it's a relatively minor thing. But I think by this trip, the changes they made actually worked well. And I understood, they just sort of changed the order thing, which I think they do routinely, just depending on what's happening in the city and when the best times to visit certain attractions are. So no, I really didn't think, we all sat together for meals. Everybody got to kind of interact freely. So that wasn't an issue.
Well, Jen, Violet, thank you so much for once again, coming back on our show, I really do appreciate it. Violet, first time, but Jen, I know it's not the first time you've been on with us several times talking about so many different adventures that you and your family have taken. Thank you so much for that. First of all, sharing it with our listeners. Thank you for our support of our show too. Long time. We really do appreciate that. And I know that you are a family that is not just going to be sitting around home for the next couple of years. What's next step for you guys?
I think probably Violet and I are going to go on our own to Costa Rica next spring. Just not with ABD, are just going to sort of have a mother-daughter trip. Chris and Garrett are going to go on a school field trip. And then next summer, we're going to hopefully finally go to Alaska on DCL. We've been wanting to do that for a few years. And then hopefully on the Rhine river cruise. Those are sort of our two big ones for next summer.
That sounds awesome. But also, I feel like your husband and son are getting the short end of that stick. You guys are going to Costa Rica and they're going on a field trip.
They
didn't want to.
Violet and I are pretty adventurous. We like to zip line and hike, and they're a little less into that, but I think they will be missing out.
I think so too.
But we're excited. I'm gonna hopefully going to go on the Wish at some point this year. We're sort of still. It's hard because Violet's starting high school, so it becomes very tough to miss any days.
Normally, Mom takes me out for 1 or 2 weeks, and I told her, first year of high school, I'm going to try to be there no more than like 1 day at a time here and there. Try to be there for most of high school.
Yeah.
It's so funny when the kids are like the ones that are saying, no, please let me stay at school.
She's much more responsible than
Yeah, just wait, Christy. Andrew,
no, Blake already is like this.
I was going to say, Andrew, our oldest, is the same way. He's got 2 AP classes coming up for 11th grade, and he definitely wants his time in school to make sure he gets that done. So good on you, Violet, for doing that. keep your mom in check there. So
I'm like, I only have 4 more years with you.
So we have breaks, Mom.
It's hard.
Oh man. Well, once again, thanks you two for taking the time out of your day to come on and talk about just an amazing trip through Europe, kind of a trip of a lifetime, seeing so much of different parts of Europe that I know a lot of people would love to venture to at some point. And I do appreciate you coming on to share that with our listeners. So all the best to you as the summer kind of continues on. I hope you guys enjoy the last month and a half or so until school starts. Violet, good luck in high school. Pretty exciting to start that, I'm sure.
Very much. We're excited.
When you guys get back from your next trip, and I'm sure it'll probably be before Costa Rica and Alaska for some reason, and you're willing to come back on and share your experiences, we sure would love to have you back on. So appreciate it. All the best to you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Well, that's going to wrap up our show today. Once again, I really want to thank Jen and Violet for coming on and sharing their amazing experience this past summer as they started off with a short escape in Barcelona, then jumped on the beautiful Disney Magic for a 7-night Mediterranean cruise between Barcelona and Civitavecchia, and of course, capping it off with that Adventures by Disney Italy tour, what just a once-in-a-lifetime trip. Well, if you've enjoyed this show and you know others who would enjoy it as well, we sure would appreciate it if you pass it along. It helps us get a little bit better known in the Disney cruising and the Disney podcasting community in general. And if you have time to go over and leave us an iTunes review or wherever you listen to this podcast, leave us a review. That helps others find this show as well. Thank you to each and every one of you who've taken the time to do that lately. As always, we'd like to give a huge shout out to our Patreon supporters who help bring this show to you each and every week ad-free. If you'd like to find out more about our Patreon program, you go to patreon.com/DCL podcast and find out all the info there. Well, we are more than halfway through October and going to be excited the next 2 weeks to head out onto the high seas for a couple Halloween on the High Seas episodes to get you in the mood, as Halloween is just right around the corner. And then after that, it's well, Costco's already had it up, but Christmas is coming quickly and the holidays are coming quickly, so we'll be on that after Halloween as well. So between now and our next show, if you are headed out on a Disney cruise, headed down to Disneyland, Disney World, or out with Adventures by Disney, on behalf of myself, Steve, Christy, and Chris, all of us here at the DCL Podcast, we want to wish you to be well, enjoy time with family and friends, and we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast.
The DCL Podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.